Hey everyone! Tonight we begin with something that might feel too familiar. The sun was barely leaning west when my phone rang, just a soft Friday afternoon in Willow Creek. Nothing dramatic. I had just finished folding a small basket of towels. Still warm. Still holding that faint lavender scent I always loved. The laundry room window was cracked open, letting in the whisper of breeze and summer cicadas. And then the screen lit up. Alyssa. My daughter doesn't usually call just to say hi. I should have known. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Hey, Mom, Alyssa said, skipping the pleasantries. Can you watch the baby this weekend? Eric and I have that work retreat in Asheville, and Maddie's staying with his parents. We'll be back late Sunday. I paused. I really did. Not out of cruelty, but because my right knee was still sore from surgery, and I had a checkup appointment Saturday morning. Nothing major. Just a little thing I'd put off twice already. I can't this weekend, I said gently. I have a doctor's appointment Saturday morning. My knee. There was a pause on her end. Then the chill. Wow. Okay. I guess you're just not being very supportive of our family. The words landed like a slap. I wanted to remind her of everything, the down payment I gave her and Eric for their first home. The nights I stayed up rocking Maddie when she had colic. The grocery runs. The birthday cakes. The late night emergency calls. But I didn't. Because what would be the point? I just didn't expect this from you. She added, we really needed you this weekend. I don't know what we're going to do now. You're her parents, I said, my voice soft. You'll figure it out. She hung up. No goodbye. No breath. Just silence. An hour later, a text came in. Please don't come by the house anymore. It's time for some boundaries. We've changed the locks. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands trembled. My lips were pressed so hard together I could feel the pulse in them. Changed the locks. Not a call, not a conversation, just a message. After everything, I don't remember grabbing my keys or putting on shoes, but I drove there anyway. The street looked the same, flagstones warm in the sun, chalk drawings on driveways, a tricycle left by the curb, but something had shifted. Something invisible and irreversible. Their house, pale brick, 2-story, green door. I parked across the street and stared at it. I had painted that door with Alyssa the day they moved in. She was pregnant with Maddie then, laughing that the forest green looked too adult. I rang the bell. No answer. I rang again. I saw a curtain move upstairs. Heard quick whispers. The third ring was out of habit. Still nothing. I pulled out the spare key, the one they gave me just in case. It didn't work. It caught in the lock, jerked awkwardly, unmoving. They really had changed it. I walked back to the car slowly, like balancing something fragile in my chest. Was it rage? Sorrow, disbelief. Back home, I made tea and forgot to drink it. The cup cooled, untouched. The house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Emma's old drawings were still magnet-pinned to the fridge. A turkey made from her traced hand. Best grandma. Crayon hearts? I stared at them for a long while. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of insomnia, but something more hollow. Like I was in someone else's house. Like none of this had really happened. Saturday came. I made toast and left it half-eaten. My hands moved through routines I barely remembered initiating. Pet the cat. Water the fern, turn off the porch light. But inside, I kept repeating one sentence. She changed the locks. I stood in the doorway of the guest room. The crib was folded against the wall, waiting for Maddie's next nap at Grandma's house. I hadn't moved it in months. I hadn't thought I'd need to. I opened my closet and pulled down a shoebox marked important. Inside was an old business card, David Cole, Esquel. Family law, wills, and trusts. I hadn't called him in years, But he had been kind after Martin passed. Honest, clear-headed. He didn't treat me like a fragile old lady. I dialed. Cole and Hastings. A cheerful young voice answered. Hi, this is Linda Barrett. I was a client of Mr. Cole a while back. I'd like to make an appointment with him at his earliest convenience. One moment, Ms. Barrett. I heard clacking keys. Yes, we can fit you in Tuesday at 10 a.m. Will that work? It will. I hung up, and then I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at nothing in particular. Something had shifted in me. Not rage, not even grief. Just something clear. Like a line had been drawn in the sand, and I was no longer on the same side of it. Tuesday came faster than I expected. I didn't sleep much the night before. Not out of dread, but out of that strange kind of restless energy you get when you know something is about to change, but you're not sure what comes after. I got dressed like it mattered. Soft blue blouse, pressed pants, a cardigan I hadn't worn in years, but always liked because it made my eyes look less tired. I even dabbed on a little lipstick. Not for anyone else, just to remember I still could. David Cole's office was in the same spot it had always been, brick building on the corner of Franklin and 3rd, with too many potted plants in the window and a bell that jingled when you walked in. Some things don't change, even when everything else does. His receptionist, Julie, hadn't aged a day, still wore purple cardigans and always greeted you like you were her favorite aunt. Ms. Barrett, she smiled. Mr. Cole is ready for you. David stood when I walked in. He looked a little older, more salt than pepper now, but still had that steady gaze that made you feel like you weren't crazy, even when the world around you had gone sideways. Linda, he said warmly. Good to see you, though I'm guessing not under the happiest circumstances. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap. I need to update my will and revoke power of attorney. That got his attention. Still, Alyssa, he asked gently. I nodded. He didn't press, just opened a leather-bound folder and pulled out my old documents. We can start wherever you want. I looked around the office, its dusty shelves and neat stacks of manila folders. Then I took a breath. I don't want Alyssa listed as my medical or financial proxy anymore. I also don't want her or Eric listed as primary beneficiaries. His eyebrows lifted, but again, he said nothing. I want it all to go into a trust. For my niece, her name's Hannah Monroe. She's in Portland, teaches at a community college, and still sends me postcards, even though she's never once asked for a thing. He began jotting notes. Do you want to remove Alyssa entirely? He asked. Yes. He looked up. Linda, I just want to make sure. These changes. She changed the locks on me. David, I said softly. Over a doctor's appointment. His pen paused mid-stroke. Understood. We worked through the details, house, bank accounts, my life insurance policy, even my antique ring collection. Everything I had spent a lifetime building. I was transferring it all not out of spite, but out of clarity. At the end, he slid a small folder across the desk. This is the revocation of power of attorney. If she tries to access your accounts or make decisions on your behalf, this stops her. I signed. As my pen lifted off the paper, I felt something subtle shift in my chest, like I'd unfastened a button that had been too tight for years. Back home, the sun was low and warm, casting long shadows through the kitchen. I sat down at the table with a glass of iced tea and opened the filing cabinet I hadn't touched in months. One by one, I pulled out folders marked mortgage, medical, gifts, Alyssa. Not because I was looking for ammunition, but because I needed to see it all laid out. Not memories, not emotions, just facts. There it was, $10,000 for their down payment. Another $5,200 when Eric lost his job and they fell behind on bills. $1,800 for Maddie's daycare gap. 3 sets of emergency plane tickets over the years. A car loan bridge. A wedding gift I still think they never cashed. But I wrote the check anyway. Every time. Alyssa said the same thing. It's just until things settle. But things never really settled. They just shifted their weight from one side to the other and kept going. I flipped to the medical folder receipts from my own treatments. Physical therapy appointments I rescheduled or skipped entirely because I had to babysit. Blood pressure meds I put off filling to send grocery money instead. I wasn't bitter. Not then. But looking at the papers, I finally asked myself something I'd never dared ask before. When did being helpful become a requirement? I had thought saying yes meant I was needed, important, a good mother. But now, staring at the math, I wondered if saying yes had just kept me in the shadows. Always useful, never seen. Later that night, I took a walk around the block. The air was thick with honeysuckle, and a pair of teenagers zipped by on skateboards, laughing like they owned the world. My neighbor Jim was out walking his dog. He waved. "Evening. Linda, you're up late." "Just stretching my legs." I smiled. "Good for you. They say walking clears the mind." He didn't know how right he was. When I got home, I brewed a second cup of tea and sat on the porch with a pad of paper. On it, I wrote a simple sentence. "From this day forward, I will not trade my dignity for proximity." It wasn't poetic, it wasn't even finished, but it was true. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The next morning, I woke up early before the birds, before the sun, before my old house groaned its usual morning aches. It felt like a different kind of quiet, not empty, not lonely, just still, like the air was holding its breath with me. I made oatmeal, real slow, stirring in a little brown sugar and cinnamon the way I used to for Maddie. But this time, I ate it hot, at the table, without checking my phone, without folding someone else's laundry, without my thoughts racing to where I needed to be or who might need me next. I was finally learning how to belong to myself again. After breakfast, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I danced, just for a moment, in my kitchen. I pulled out the old radio from the pantry, dusted it off, and found a station that still played Earth, Wind, and Fire. The song was September, and I laughed out loud when it came on because that was the song I used to play when I cleaned the windows. Alyssa hated it, said it was too bouncy, but I loved how it made the floorboards hum. So I danced. Not gracefully, not fully on beat, but I moved. My knees complained, my back popped, and I probably looked like an inflatable car lot man, but I moved. Because I could. By noon, I had showered and pulled out the small black suitcase from under my bed. I wasn't planning a trip, not yet, but I wanted it ready. I folded my favorite sweater, tucked in 2 books, and set my travel mug beside it like a promise. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope I'd been avoiding for years. My retirement savings account, the one I'd been skimming for years to bridge the gaps. 84,327.62. More than I expected, less than I'd hoped. Enough! I pulled out a notebook and wrote, "Budget for living fully. House maintenance, check. Medical expenses, covered. Travel, TBD. Emotional toll, already paid." The truth is, I had always saved for the what-ifs of my children. What if they needed me? What if the baby was sick? What if the car broke down? But now, for the first time, I was asking, what if I needed me? That afternoon, I picked up the phone and called the florist, a small place downtown I'd used for years. "Hi, this is Linda Barrett. I'd like to send a bouquet. No lilies. She's allergic." The voice on the other end smiled. "Who's it for?" "Myself." I said, "Just a small arrangement. Maybe hydrangeas and something that smells nice." There was a pause. Then the florist chuckled. "Good for you, Miss Barrett. We'll make it special." The flowers arrived at 4 p.m. White hydrangeas, a few sprigs of lavender, and 1 perfect pale yellow rose. I placed them in the center of the dining table like a centerpiece to my own beginning. I was sipping my tea when the doorbell rang. It startled me. No one ever just drops by anymore. I opened the door slowly, half expecting a package or a neighbor returning borrowed Tupperware. It was Eric. His hands were in his pockets, face flushed, eyes darting like he was looking for a script he forgot to memorize. "Linda," he said. "Eric," I replied. I came to see if we could talk." I stepped aside, didn't invite him in, but didn't shut the door either. He shifted on the porch. She's been really upset. "So she sent you?" "No," he said quickly. "I mean, yes, but I also wanted to come. We've been worried." "About what?" "About you," he said. "You've been quiet, and Maddie keeps asking for you. Alyssa doesn't know what to say to her." I crossed my arms. "Try the truth." Eric looked pained. "Look, I know things got messy, but you changed the accounts. The mortgage transfer bounced. The car insurance." "I know," I interrupted. He cleared his throat. "We just didn't expect that." "You've always been there." "That's the problem," I said. "You've built a life that requires me to disappear." Eric looked away. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "Tell Alyssa I got her message." Loud and clear. She changed the locks. "Eric, that's not messy. That's permanent." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "I'm not angry. Truly. I'm just done." He nodded, slowly. "Okay, I'll tell her." I closed the door gently after he left. Not with malice, with finality. Later that night, I stood at the window watching the porch light catch in the glass vase on the table. The flowers looked even prettier in the dark, like something glowing from within. I whispered, "Thank you," and I wasn't even sure who I was thanking. Myself, maybe, the florist, the quiet. I slept deeply that night, and in my dream, I wasn't standing outside locked doors. I was dancing again, in the middle of my kitchen, with no music, no apologies, just joy. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of rain, earthy, clean, like the world had pressed a cool cloth to its own forehead. My little neighborhood always felt softer after a storm. Even the sidewalks seemed quieter, like they were letting go of something heavy. I padded barefoot into the kitchen and found a note I'd scribbled the night before. "You are not a villain for choosing peace." I couldn't even remember writing it, but there it was taped to the fridge like some holy reminder. I smiled and poured my coffee. Then I sat at the table and looked through the window, past the hydrangeas, past the fence, into the stillness. My mind wasn't racing anymore. It wasn't wondering if Maddie's cold had turned into a fever, or if Alyssa needed groceries, or if Eric remembered to pay the water bill. I wasn't chasing anything. I wasn't needed. And for once, that felt like freedom, not punishment. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number?" I almost didn't answer, but something in me said, "Pick it up."
Hello?
"Hi, is this Mrs. Linda Barrett?"
Yes.
"This is Rosa from Memorial Grove. I'm calling to confirm your tour this afternoon." I blinked. Then I remembered. I'd filled out an online interest form weeks ago, just before all the locks and texts and silence. I was curious back then, not serious, but maybe curiosity was the first step. "Of course," I said, "I'll be there." Memorial Grove wasn't a nursing home. Not quite. It was more like independent living with dignity. You got your own little cottage, access to a garden, someone to fix your plumbing when it moaned at 3 a.m. The place had chickens, real ones. The website said fresh eggs and fresh air every morning. I liked that. So I went, drove myself across town, past the grocery store where Maddie once threw a tantrum over yogurt, past the park where I used to push Emma on the swings, past every place I'd been the background character in someone else's scene. Memorial Grove sat on a wide hill with lavender bushes blooming along the drive. A young woman named Kayla met me at the door. She was chipper, but not fake. The kind of person who could make you believe a paper cut was a spiritual opportunity. "We're so glad to have you, Mrs. Barrett," she said, leading me inside. "Linda," I corrected. "Please." She smiled. "Of course, Linda." The tour was simple. Warm kitchen, bright common room, library that smelled like pages and lemon oil. The cottages were small but cozy. Each one had a rocking chair on the porch and hooks for wind chimes. "This one just became available," Kayla said, unlocking the door. "It's on the quiet side of the property." I stepped inside. It had light. Real, honest light. The kind that didn't feel filtered through someone else's schedule. The walls were pale sage. There was a fireplace. The bedroom had built-in shelves. I stood in the middle of the room and exhaled. "You okay?" Kayla asked. "Yeah," I said. I forgot what it felt like to imagine something new." We walked the rest of the grounds, and I asked questions. How soon could I move in? Could I bring books? Could I leave if I changed my mind? Yes, and yes. Back in my car. I sat with the brochure in my lap. It felt surreal, like a door had quietly opened behind me while I was too busy looking at the one that had just slammed shut. That night, I didn't sleep much, but it wasn't the bad kind of restlessness. It was the kind where your brain won't stop redecorating the future. The next day, I called Claire. Guess who might be moving into a cottage with a garden and fresh eggs every morning? "You?" "Me." She didn't say, "Are you sure?" "But what about your house?" She just said, "Send pictures. I want to help you choose curtains." I laughed. Later that week, I scheduled an appointment with Alan Rivers again. Just to update some contact info. Nothing big, nothing urgent. But he greeted me with the same quiet respect that made me feel like a whole person. "You look lighter," he said. "I feel it," I replied. He sipped his coffee and looked over the paperwork. "So, you're seriously considering a move?" "I'm not running away," I said. "I'm stepping toward something." He nodded. "Good." As I left, he handed me a small business card. "If you ever need a notary out there, my cousin lives near Memorial Grove. She's tough as nails and makes a mean banana bread." I tucked the card into my purse. At home, I started cleaning again. Not the frantic kind of cleaning, but the kind that feels like shedding. I sorted through boxes in the attic, found Maddie's baby shoes, Alyssa's old soccer trophies, photos from every Halloween where I'd hand-sewn the costumes. I kept some, let go of most. Then I found a letter, folded, yellowed, addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. It simply said, "I hope someday you learn to hold your own hand first." I cried. Not because it was sad, because it was right. That weekend, I went to the farmer's market, bought fresh peaches and a bundle of snapdragons, ran into an old friend, Barbara, from my book club days. She was surprised to see me out and about. "You look peaceful," she said. "I'm getting there." She reached into her tote and handed me a jar of homemade jam. "For your next chapter," she said, and I took it with a smile, because maybe this time I wouldn't be saving it for someone else's table. Maybe it was for mine. A few days later, I found myself sitting in my backyard just after sunrise, wrapped in a blanket with a steaming mug of tea. The neighborhood was still sleeping. The birds were only beginning to rustle in the trees, and a soft mist clung to the grass like a secret that hadn't quite let go of the night. I liked this time of day, before phones buzzed, before obligations had time to knock. It was the kind of quiet where you could actually hear your own heart and know it was trying to tell you something. That morning, mine was whispering, "You've made it this far. Keep going." I had begun to prepare the house. Not for sale, at least, not yet, but for departure. I'd called in a painter to fix the chipped baseboards, scheduled an inspection, and even started pricing movers. I boxed up books and labeled everything with meticulous librarian flair kitchen essentials. Winter coats, linens keep. The last label always gave me pause. Keep. Because, for the first time, I was asking, keep for who? For me? That question came up again when I found a box in the hallway closet labeled Alyssa College Years. Inside were concert stubs, mismatched mugs, a pair of shoes that had definitely seen better days. There was also a photo her and Maddie, noses pressed together like a mother-daughter mirror. I held it for a long time, Then I slipped it into a padded envelope and mailed it to her with no note. Let her decide what to keep. That same afternoon, I got another call. This time, it wasn't a number I recognized, it was blocked. I hesitated, picked it up anyway. Hello? There was a long pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in weeks. Mom. My hand froze around the edge of the counter. Alyssa. Yeah, I didn't expect you to answer. Well, I did. More silence. Then she said it. I don't know what to say. I sighed. Then just say what you mean. I think I made a mistake. A strange thing happens when you've been hurt by someone you love. Even when they start to sound human again, cracked, unsure, soft, you brace yourself. Not for another blow, but for the ache of almost believing them. What kind of mistake, I asked. I shouldn't have sent that text. I shouldn't have changed the locks. That's a start. She inhaled sharply. I was mad. I felt abandoned. I guess I wanted to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I said, more dry than angry. You did. I didn't think you'd cut us off. I didn't think you'd actually stop. You thought I'd come crawling back. Like always? No, she blurted. I don't know. I thought you'd understand. I had to laugh at that. Understand what that, because I said no once. Everything I ever did suddenly didn't count. I'm sorry, she said, quickly, like it was a reflex. I didn't mean to make you feel disposable. But you did. I know. Then her voice cracked. Just a little. Maddie misses you every day. She keeps asking why you don't come over. I don't know what to tell her anymore. I stared out the window at the bird feeder, where a small finch was hopping nervously from perch to perch. You tell her, I said slowly, that Grandma needed a break to take care of herself. And that doesn't mean she doesn't love her. It means she finally started loving herself, too. She was quiet again. Then would you come see her? She's been drawing you pictures. I closed my eyes. I'm not ready yet. But she is, Alyssa whispered. I know, I said, but this visit when it happens has to be on my terms. No strings, no guilt, no passive-aggressive comments about sacrifice. She let out a shaky breath. Okay, I get it. Do you? I think so. Well, let that sit with you for a while. I will. We hung up without a goodbye. That felt honest. Later that night, I told Claire about the call. We were on the phone, both of us curled in our respective chairs, mugs in hand like it was ritual. Do you believe she's changed? Claire asked. No, I said, but I think she's beginning to realize that I have. Claire chuckled. You've always been the backbone, but even bones get tired. Tell that to my knees, I said, which made her laugh so hard she snorted into her cocoa. There was something healing in that, being seen without being pitied, being heard without needing to bleed for it. Before bed, I added a new line to my notebook. Forgiveness can begin before it's deserved, but not before you're ready. The next day, I drove out to Memorial Grove again. I brought a picnic this time, apple slices, brie, a tiny bottle of sparkling water. I sat at the little bench near the koi pond and just existed. An older gentleman passed by with a cane. He nodded at me. Nice day? It is, I said. Very quiet. He smiled. That's the best kind. We chatted for a bit. His name was Martin, widower, former math teacher, liked puzzles and hated fennel. He told me a joke about algebra that made no sense but made me laugh anyway. As he walked away, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until now. This wasn't the end of anything. This was the beginning. I didn't have to stay stuck in the roles I was assigned, the giver, the fixer, the backup plan. I could be something new. Someone new. Linda Barrett, reader, thinker, possible chicken owner, and maybe, just maybe, happy. The morning after the call with Alyssa, I didn't check my phone right away. I didn't rush to see if she'd followed up, or if Maddie had left me a message in her tiny, typo-filled text style. I just sat on the porch with a slice of toast, honey melting into its corners, and let the breeze move through the trees like a whispered lullaby. There's something about slowing down that makes everything inside you start to speak louder. the regrets, the questions, the tiny wins you didn't know counted. I thought about Maddie's picture, the one Alyssa said she'd drawn. I wondered if she'd drawn the porch, too. Or my rocking chair. Maybe the way I always cut her apples into stars. I also thought about the letter I'd never answered. The one Alyssa had written after the first real silence. The one that blamed, shamed, and danced around apology like it was a hot skillet. I had left it tucked behind my cookbooks, unread after the second paragraph. But that morning, I pulled it out. I didn't read it for what it said. I read it for what it tried and failed to say. And then I wrote a letter of my own. No, not to her, to Maddie. Sweetheart, I began. You are the only person in this story who never asked me for anything but love, and you always gave it back without keeping score. It was 3 pages long by the time I finished. I folded it into thirds, tucked it into an envelope with a pressed wildflower from my garden, and dropped it in the mailbox. I didn't know if it would reach her hands. I didn't know if Alyssa would even give it to her. But I had to believe in the part of my daughter that still knew what love looked like even when it didn't come with money or unconditional surrender. Later that day, I drove into town, not for groceries, not for errands. For me, there's a small store down on Magnolia Avenue, one of those places that smells like cedar and patchouli and carries candles named things like Evening Nostalgia and Library Whispers. I wandered the aisles, not looking for anything in particular, until I came across a journal. It was bound in soft leather, the color of wet bark. On the cover, in gold foil, it said simply, "Start where you are." I bought it. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote the first entry. I am not broken. I'm just learning a new shape. Then I wrote a second. Alyssa is hurting, but that doesn't mean I have to bleed with her. And a third, forgiveness is not an obligation, it's a choice. And sometimes, it's a process that starts long before you know where it will end. That night, Claire called again. I was thinking, she said between bites of something crunchy, how strange it is that we're always taught to give without limits, especially women. I laughed. Yes, we're the casseroles and glue sticks and emergency rides and open wallets. We're the family infrastructure. Claire snorted. Right until we ask for something back. Then we're difficult. There was a long pause. Then I said, you know, I used to think my value came from being needed. And now I'm learning that my value just is. Claire was quiet for a moment. That's it, she whispered. That's the whole thing. We ended the call after an hour, both yawning, both lighter. The next morning, I got an email from my old library director, short and sweet. Heard you stopped by. Elena says you've still got that spark. Want to teach a workshop this fall? I reread it 3 times. It wasn't the old job. It wasn't a commitment, but it was a start. I clicked reply. Yes, let's talk. Then I closed the laptop and took a walk around the block. Not for exercise, not for errands, just to move. At the far end of the neighborhood, a little girl was drawing with chalk on her driveway. I didn't recognize her, but she looked up and waved like I was a regular character in her world. I waved back. What are you drawing? A rocket, she said proudly. It's going to the moon. That's ambitious, I said. She shrugged. You just have to pick a spot and go? I smiled so hard it hurt. Yeah, I said. You do? When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting. I almost didn't listen. But then I did. Hi, Mom? Alyssa's voice again, softer this time. I read the letter. Maddie did too. She cried. Then she smiled. She said she wants to come for a visit. Just her, if you're okay with that. I hit replay, twice. Then I whispered to the empty room. Yes, I'm okay with that. But I didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, I opened my journal again and wrote, let the apology come with action. Let love come without proof. Then I set the pen down and made another cup of tea. The world didn't feel fixed, but it felt like mine again. The next few days passed in a rhythm I hadn't known I missed. Cool mornings with coffee on the porch. Soft music humming through the kitchen as I folded laundry. and the occasional rustle of my journal pages as I wrote things down I never thought I'd say out loud. I didn't hear back from Alyssa right away, but Maddie sent a postcard, a real one, with a dolphin on the front and the words, "Thinking of you," scrawled in marker across the back. Her handwriting looked more like mine than I expected. Curvy, a little dramatic, full of flair. "Hi, Grandma," she wrote. "Mom said I could come soon." I packed my books and the flashlight. "Do you still have my big blanket, the blue one with the clouds? I miss you so much. My teeth hurt. Is that real love? Maddie?" I smiled so hard I had to sit down. I found the blanket that afternoon. It was folded neatly in the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Still soft, still smelling faintly of the lavender sachets I tucked into every drawer. I held it against my chest and whispered, "Soon." And then, just when I started to believe nothing else surprising could happen, Alyssa called. Not a voicemail, not a text, an actual call. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before I picked up. "Mom," she said, just that. No preamble, no fire in her voice, just a quiet crackle. "I'm here," I said. She hesitated. "I'm bringing Maddie by this weekend. She's been asking every night." I don't want to come in. Not yet. But she needs to see you. She needs to know you're still there." There was an ache in her tone, like someone standing in a hallway they didn't quite want to enter. "That's fine," I said gently. "You can drop her off and pick her up whenever you're ready. No pressure." Another pause. "Thanks, Mom." We hung up, and I sat very still, watching the shadows move across the wall like slow dancers. Saturday morning came with bright sun and the kind of warmth that clings to your arms like a memory. I baked banana bread, fluffed the pillows in the guest room, and laid the cloud blanket across Maddie's bed. Then I waited. At 10:04, a silver SUV pulled up outside. I saw Maddie's face pressed against the window even before the door opened. She ran, full speed, hair wild, backpack bouncing. "Grandma?" I met her halfway down the sidewalk, knees already protesting. She hit me like joy in motion, arms flung around my waist, small hands clutching the back of my shirt like she thought I might vanish if she let go. "You smell like cinnamon," she said, muffled. "And you smell like jelly beans and sidewalk chalk." She laughed, pulling back. "I missed you every day, even the days I was mad." My throat tightened. "I missed you, too, baby, even the days I cried." Alyssa didn't get out of the car. She just nodded once through the window and drove away. I didn't wave. I didn't scowl. I just carried Maddie inside, her hand in mine, like nothing had ever broken. We spent the day exactly as we used to, making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in the shape of stars, reading stories on the porch while she interrupted every paragraph with questions, playing a card game she'd invented on the spot and insisted she'd won even though I had all the aces. "Grandma?" she said between chews of banana bread. "Do grown-ups ever forget how to be nice?" That one stopped me. "I think," I said slowly, "sometimes they forget how to be soft, because life makes them feel like they always have to be strong. But strong doesn't mean mean. You know?" She nodded like she did, like she really did. That night, after her bath and 2 stories and a glass of water with 2 ice cubes, not 3, she curled up beside me on the couch. "I like it here," she whispered. "I like it when you're here." "Mom says things are hard right now." I nodded. Things are hard sometimes, but we still have good days. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded drawing. This one was different, more detailed. Our porch. My chair. Her in the rocking chair beside me. A sun in the corner with sunglasses and a speech bubble that said, "Keep shining." I laughed. "That's the best sun I've ever seen." She looked proud. "That's because he's yours." At bedtime, she asked if we could sleep in the same room. So I brought my pillow to her bed and tucked us in under the cloud blanket. She drifted off mid-sentence, her fingers curled around mine. And for the first time in months, I slept the whole night through. The next morning, when Alyssa arrived, She stayed in the car again, but Maddie turned to me before leaving. Can I come again next weekend? Of course. She paused at the door. Even if Mom's still weird? I bent down and kissed her forehead. You are always welcome. No matter how weird anyone else is. She giggled and skipped to the car. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away. No drama, no ultimatums, just a quiet thread being stitched again. Back inside, I poured myself tea and opened my journal. Let the child lead. Sometimes they remember the way back when the grown-ups forget. Later that day, I heard the mail drop through the slot. A small envelope. Claire's handwriting. Inside, a note and a photo of the porch chair I'd sat in last month, bathed in orange light. Still here, she'd written, "Come when you're ready." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I placed it next to Maddie's sun drawing on the fridge, side by side, like two halves of a compass. One pointed to what I came from, the other to where I might go next. The days after Maddie's visit felt different, lighter somehow, like I'd taken a deep breath and finally exhaled after months of holding it in. I moved through the house slowly that week, touching little things like they mattered again. The sun catcher in the kitchen window, the crocheted throw I never quite finished. Even the old bookshelf in the hall, full of novels I'd read twice and couldn't bear to donate. There was comfort in the quiet, and for once, it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Claire called on Wednesday evening. "Just checking in," she said. "You sound good." "I think I am," I replied. "Or at least, I'm getting there." She told me about a new sourdough recipe she'd ruined spectacularly and the neighbor's goat that kept escaping. We didn't talk about Alyssa, or the trust, or any of it. And that was the beauty of it, someone who knew everything, and still asked how I was instead of what I planned to do next. That night, I wrote another list in my journal. I titled it, "What Peace Feels Like." Windows open, no need to check the weather. The smell of clean sheets. Tea brewed just right. A grandchild's laugh, remembered and real. Saying no without guilt. A life lived in my own name. By Friday, I'd heard nothing from Alyssa. Not a text. Not even a passive-aggressive forwarded article about eldercare boundaries like she once sent during her mindfulness phase. But Saturday morning, right on time, Maddie's knock came again. She had her backpack, a new book, and a grin big enough to part clouds. Guess what she said before I could get a word in? "We're doing a school project about our favorite places, and I picked here." I raised my brows. "Here? This house?" "Yep, I'm gonna draw your porch and your cookies and you, but like a cartoon, you're gonna have huge glasses and superpowers." "Superpowers? Huh, yep. You make everything better with soup, and you always know when I'm sad. That's, like, your magic." I laughed. "Well, I suppose there are worse reputations." We spent the morning baking. She cracked every egg like a tiny Hulk. Shells everywhere, but pure joy on her face. Then we curled up to read from her book, a fantasy novel where the grandmother was a secret warrior queen. "See," she said, nudging my side. "Even in books, grandmas save the day." "Don't let the secret out," I whispered. "They'll all want one." Around noon, we walked to the little park down the road. The wind was crisp but not cold, the kind that makes leaves dance in little swirls at your feet. Maddie raced ahead, then circled back with questions like, "Do dogs understand English, or just vibes? If you could live in a book, which one would it be? Why do grown-ups fight with their moms?" That last one caught me off guard. I stopped, crouched to meet her eye level. "I think sometimes grown-ups get scared," I said. "And instead of saying they're scared, they get loud or mean or quiet. But it's not really about the fight. It's about forgetting how to be soft." She nodded like she got it. "Mom's not really mean, just scared a lot." I kissed her forehead. It's okay to love someone and still be confused by them. That evening, I let her choose the movie. We watched something animated and chaotic, and she laughed so hard, juice came out her nose. "Worth it," she said, wiping her face with my sleeve. Sunday morning, she helped me clip herbs from the garden. We stood in the pale sunlight with the rosemary, the mint, and that one stubborn basil plant still holding on like a champion. "Can I have some to take home?" she asked. "I want to start a plant journal. You know, like grandma science. You can have all of it, I said, and I meant it. When Alyssa arrived for pickup, she didn't just wave from the car. She got out. She didn't come all the way to the door, but she stood on the path, hands in the pockets of her too-thin jacket. Maddie hugged me tight. Next weekend, same time. Absolutely. As she walked down the path, Alyssa looked up. Her eyes met mine, tired, unsure. She didn't say anything, neither did I. But I gave her the smallest nod. Not an invitation, not forgiveness, just recognition. She nodded back. After they left, I went inside and made myself tea. At some point, I found myself standing at the bookshelf in the hallway again. I pulled out an old copy of Little Women, the one with my name written in the front cover, dated 1971. Inside, I'd once underlined a sentence in blue ink: I am not afraid of storms, for I am learning how to sail my ship. It felt true in a way it never had before. That afternoon, I sat down at my desk and started writing Maddie a letter. Not because I had to, but because I wanted her to have something in my voice that would last longer than banana bread or porch days. I told her she was brave, kind, wildly curious. I told her I hoped she'd never forget that her feelings mattered and that boundaries are just another way of loving yourself well. I signed it, folded it, and slid it into an envelope. Then I added a note for Claire and another for myself. The beginning of a new file. Maybe letters that don't ask permission. I tucked them away, not because I was hiding, but because now, finally, I had something worth saving. It was Wednesday when I heard from Alyssa again, not through a message or a call this time, but through Maddie. She showed up after school, same as always, this time with a folder tucked under her arm and a very serious look on her face. "Grandma," she said, "I have something important." I cleared off the kitchen table like we were about to conduct national diplomacy. She pulled out a stack of construction paper, some taped together, some folded into little flaps. At the top in glitter pen, the Maddie report. Why Grandma's house is the best place on earth. "Page 1, she said, flipping it open dramatically. "Is your tea. You make it better than Mommy." "Well, I do use actual tea leaves and not just vibes," I replied. She giggled and turned the page. "Page 2. You listen." That one stopped me. I waited, but she didn't add anything, just smiled. That evening, when she was settled with her book and a snack, I stepped out onto the porch with my tea and the folder. I reread each page slowly. A map of the house with little labels: Grandma's chair, cookie zone, magic cupboard, that's just where I keep the sewing kit, a drawing of the two of us under a tree that looked suspiciously like broccoli, a page titled "Stuff You Say That's Weird But Nice." Don't let the storm rent space in your heart, and peace and tea are kindred things. I smiled. She was watching me from the window. I waved, and she waved back. Later that night, after she fell asleep on the couch, I picked up my phone. One unread message. Alyssa again. It wasn't long. "Maddie talks about you constantly. I'm not sure where that leaves us, but she misses you. I guess I do too. I'm sorry." 3 sentences, no defense, no excuse, just something. I didn't respond. Not right away. I reread the message, then set my phone down and covered Maddie with the old quilt she always requested, the one that smelled like lavender and thyme. The next morning, Maddie woke up early and padded into the kitchen while I was still pouring milk into my coffee. She rubbed her eyes. "Mom says she wants to come over, to say hi." I raised a brow. "When did she say that?" "Last night, after she picked me up." "And what do you think about that?" She shrugged. "I think she misses you, but I also think you're mad. And sometimes moms do dumb things." I nodded. "They really do." "Like epically dumb," she added for good measure. I chuckled. That weekend, Maddie came over again, but this time, so did Alyssa. She stood at the gate for a long time before walking up the path. She was wearing that same too-thin jacket, and her hair was pulled back like she'd been in a hurry. I opened the door before she could knock. We looked at each other in the late morning light. And for a second, we weren't mother and daughter, we were just 2 women holding decades of silence between them. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, but then I stepped back, and nodded. She walked inside slowly, like she wasn't sure the floor would hold her. Maddie was in the kitchen, reading a cereal box. She looked up and waved. "Hey, Mom!" Alyssa waved back, then turned to me. "Thanks for letting me stop by." I gestured toward the table. "Tea," she blinked. "Are you offering me tea? Or threatening me with it?" "Depends on how this goes," I said lightly. She cracked a small smile. We sat. The kettle hissed. I poured for both of us. "I don't know how to start," she said. "Then don't," I replied. "Let's just sit." And we did. 10 minutes passed in silence. She stared at the bookshelf. I stared at my cup. Finally, she spoke. I was angry and overwhelmed, and I took it out on you. I didn't answer. She continued. "I said things I didn't mean, and then I meant them, just long enough to convince myself I was right. Still, I waited. I never thought you'd actually walk away. You've always just been there." I finally looked at her. Exactly. That one word landed like a dropped plate between us. She flinched. "I know I messed up. Maddie told me what you've been teaching her about boundaries, about saying no. I think it's finally sunk in. What that means, that it's not rejection. It's self-respect." She took a breath. "I miss you. Not just for the help. For you. For your weird phrases. For the way you always know when something's wrong, even when I don't. And if you don't want to come back into our lives, I understand." I leaned back. My tea had gone cold. I didn't forgive her. Not in that moment. But I saw her. The woman she was trying to become. The daughter I remembered. The mother she might still be. "I won't be your safety net anymore," I said, "but I'll always be Maddie's grandma." She nodded. I didn't expect anything more. We sat for a long time after that. Maddie came in, sat on the floor between us, completely unaware of the tectonic shift in the air. "Can we go to the park now?" Alyssa stood. "Let's go." I followed them to the door. Watched as Maddie skipped down the path. Alyssa paused. "Would it be okay if we came again next week?" I looked at her. "Let's take it slow," she smiled softly. "Okay." As they walked away, I closed the door behind them and whispered to the quiet. One step at a time. The porch creaked as I stepped back out. The sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to see what came next. The week passed in quiet rhythms. I swept the porch in the mornings, wiped down the kitchen counters twice a day, even if they didn't need it, and refilled the bird feeder by the back fence. It was a stillness I'd earned, not from idleness, but from clarity. On Friday afternoon, the mailbox held something unexpected, an envelope from Maddie. Inside, a drawing of us at the park. Me pushing her on the swings, both of us with enormous cartoon smiles. At the top, in rainbow-colored crayon, "Me and Grandma are happy now." I pinned it to the fridge next to her old turkey handprint. Some things were too precious to keep in drawers. Saturday came, and so did Alyssa and Maddie. There was no big moment, no dramatic apology, just small things. Alyssa brought banana bread store-bought, but still, she asked if I needed help trimming the garden hedges. And when I offered tea, she didn't joke. She just said, "Yes, please." We were sitting on the porch when she finally said it. "I talked to Dad last week, told him everything." That surprised me. And I asked. He wasn't shocked. He said, "Your mom always gave until it broke her back. Maybe she finally figured out she doesn't owe us for being her children." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She looked down. He also told me he regretted not stepping in more. Not noticing when I started treating you like a resource instead of a person. There it was. The old ache stirred regret wrapped in some fresh acknowledgement. "Your dad always saw more than he said," I murmured. Alyssa nodded. "I think I finally get that now." Maddie bounded onto the porch, hair wild, a juice box in hand. "Grandma, can we bake cookies tomorrow?" Alyssa looked at me. "Only if that's okay." I smiled. "We'll see." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something like healing. That evening, After they left, I opened my old recipe box, tattered corners, faded ink. Inside was the oatmeal cookie recipe I used every fall, the one Alyssa had once loved. I ran my fingers over the card. The smudge from a cinnamon spill long ago. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make the cookies or not, but I knew it mattered that it was my choice now. That night, I found myself sitting on the floor of the hall closet, surrounded by old photos. There we were, me, Alyssa, and my husband, Dan, sitting on the hood of the old Chevy, smiling under a sky that had since faded from our lives. I found a photo of Alyssa holding Maddie as a baby, both of them asleep on my living room couch. And another from a Halloween years ago, Maddie dressed as a lion, roaring at the camera, her tiny fists clenched. I didn't cry, not this time. But I whispered a soft thank you to the moments that still held weight. Sunday came, and Maddie showed up in her apron, ready for cookies. We baked. She stirred with all the precision of a 5-year-old, which meant flour in her eyebrows and sugar on the dog. Alyssa watched from the side, uncertain whether she was allowed to laugh yet. I tossed her an apron. "Make yourself useful," I said. She stepped forward, tentative but willing. We moved through the motions: flour, eggs, cinnamon, vanilla, each ingredient a kind of truce. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of one. When the cookies were in the oven, Maddie flopped onto the couch and announced, "I think Grandma's house has the best smells." Alyssa turned to me. "Thank you for letting us come." "You're not entitled to it," I replied, "but you're welcome." She nodded. That night, after they left, I went to the drawer where I'd kept the letters, the documents, the outlines of all my boundaries. I added a new folder, labeled it ongoing. Not because everything was fixed, but because maybe not everything needed to be final. Sometimes, life wasn't about drawing hard lines. It was about learning when to bend without breaking. I took one of the still warm cookies and stepped out onto the porch. The wind had picked up, the trees swaying with slow resolve. I sat on the swing, legs tucked under me, and let the quiet settle. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text from Alyssa. "Thanks for the cookies. And the chance." No heart emoji, no clever sign-off, but honest, I replied. One step at a time. Monday arrived like an exhale. The kind that follows a storm, not because everything's fine, but because the air has cleared a little. I went about my morning like usual. Tea, toast, a short walk to the mailbox. Inside was a slim envelope, pale green, addressed in careful handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it slowly, unsure of what to expect. It was from Maddie's kindergarten teacher. "Dear Mrs. Holloway," it began. "I wanted to write and thank you. Maddie recently shared during circle time that her grandma is her best friend. She drew a picture of the two of you making warm stuff with cinnamon and told us that your hugs feel like blankets and cookies at the same time. It moved us all." I read the letter twice, then placed it beside my tea like a companion. Sometimes love finds new routes when the old roads crumble. Later that afternoon, Claire called. Her voice came through warm and familiar, like sun on a hardwood floor. "How are things?" she asked. "Strange? Soft? Mending? Maybe?" I said. She laughed gently. "Soft is underrated." We talked about the fog along the coast, her latest garden mishap involving rogue squirrels, and the fact that Percy the cat had claimed her reading chair permanently. "I miss you," she said, finally. "The porch misses you." "I'll be back," I told her, but I needed to see what home still felt like. That evening, I pulled out my will, the updated one. Not to change it again, just to see it, to remember that I had done something for myself. I placed it back in the drawer, but I added a sticky note on the front. "If found, please read carefully." She meant it. The next day, I stopped by the library again. Elena was behind the front desk, mid-conversation with a young man who looked both lost and overwhelmed. When she saw me, she beamed. "Mrs. Holloway, just in time. This one's got a donation cart crisis." I walked over. You look like someone who needs to learn the sacred art of separating water-damaged fiction from salvageable memoirs." The young man blinked. "That sounds specific." "It is," I said, "and oddly therapeutic." For the next hour, I sat with them, sorting paperbacks, discussing plot holes, and sharing how to tell a mildew stain from plain old coffee. They asked me to come back next week. I said yes. On my walk home, I passed by Alyssa's old elementary school. The playground was filled with kids, the air sharp with laughter and bark mulch. I remembered the time she forgot her lunch, and I drove across town to deliver it only for her to wave me away like I was a bother. I didn't linger in that memory. Instead, I watched a little girl climb the slide backwards and laugh like rules didn't exist. That evening, I received another message from Alyssa. "Mom, Maddie wants to come over next weekend too. She says it's more fun at your house. Can we make that work?" I stared at the screen. I thought of all the weekends I'd rearranged my life for their emergencies, their whims, their oversights, and then I replied, "This weekend is mine. Let's look at the next." Simple, honest, boundaried. I didn't check for a response. I didn't need to. Instead, I poured a glass of lemonade, turned on some music, something old and scratchy, and danced slowly in the kitchen while the dog looked at me like I'd lost it. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd finally lost the part of me that equated love with compliance, and found the part that remembered joy. Later, I pulled out my notebook. Things I still love, continued. Fresh laundry, cinnamon in everything. Children's drawings. Saying no with grace. Porch swings and slow evening. Being chosen, not used. The list kept growing, not in a rush, but with intention. When I went to bed, I left the window cracked open just enough for the breeze to find me. And in that sleep, I didn't dream of locked doors or overdue apologies. I dreamed of ocean air, rosemary bushes, and a table set just for one ready whenever I chose to share it. It started with cookies. It always does. That Saturday, I woke up before the sun, as if something important was supposed to happen. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely anymore, just calm. The kind of quiet that comes after the last box is unpacked, when you're finally home again. I mixed flour, sugar, cinnamon, and the last of the vanilla extract, rolled the dough just the way Maddie liked, thick, soft in the center, a little golden around the edges. I wasn't planning anything, just baking. The knock came mid-morning. It was Maddie. Her backpack hung crooked on one shoulder again, and her hands clutched a wrinkled picture she'd drawn. Her shoes were untied. She didn't say anything, just held it out. "I made another one," she said. It was the two of us on a bench, a big cookie between us, a cat in the background. "Where's your mom?" I asked softly, stepping aside. "She's in the car. She said I could stay if you say yes." I paused. This time, I wasn't letting the door swing open by reflex. I looked at Maddie, really looked, and saw none of Alyssa's guilt. None of her entitlement. Just a little girl who missed someone. "Would you like some cookies?" I asked. She nodded. Her eyes were already misting. And that's how she came back in, not because of Alyssa, not for apologies, not as a favor, but because Maddie needed a home that remembered her, not just raised her. Later, after cocoa and stories, I peeked outside. Alyssa was still in the car, engine running, looking straight ahead. She never got out. I didn't wave. I didn't owe her that. The next morning, I walked Maddie through the garden, showed her where the rosemary bush had overtaken the path, and let her pick a few sprigs for the kitchen. We baked herb bread together, and when it came out of the oven, her eyes widened. "You made this from the yard?" she asked. "Kind of. The yard helps," I smiled. And just like that, the house came alive again. Not in the frantic, overstretched way it had been when I was the always-on-call grandmother, but in a gentle, balanced way. Shared, not demanded. Later that week, I got another letter, this one handwritten in looping cursive. The return address was Claire's. Inside was a small Polaroid of her porch swing with a book resting on it and a note. "The seat's still here when you want it. The ocean says hi." I tucked the photo into my journal, underneath the last list of things I still love. I added, a second beginning. Porch seats waiting without pressure. Granddaughters who remember your cocoa ratio. Being remembered for kindness, not convenience. That afternoon, Alyssa finally called. Hey, Mom! Her voice was scratchy, like she hadn't slept much. I wanted to say, I saw the bank statement, the trust, everything. I didn't respond right away. I didn't expect you to actually follow through, she added. I took a breath. I told you I was serious. I thought you were just upset. I said, but not just upset. Tired, done being useful without being seen. There was silence. And then a quiet, Maddie's happier since seeing you. That's because I let her be herself. I said, perhaps a little too sharply. I guess we're still figuring things out, she muttered. I hope you do. I said, but I'm not waiting for that to happen to live my life. She didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, You really aren't coming back the same, are you? No, I said, and that's a good thing. When the call ended, I felt a calm that didn't ask to be explained. That evening, Maddie helped me sort through the bookshelf. We picked 3 old favorites, and I let her fall asleep on the couch. Her fingers curled around the spine of a well-worn Fox story. Before I turned off the lights, I whispered something. I'll never leave you, but I'm not leaving myself behind anymore either. And I meant it. You know, sometimes the hardest part of growing older isn't the aches or the quiet nights. It's realizing how easily we give ourselves away in the name of love. How we shrink just to fit into a space someone else carved out for us. A role we didn't even choose. But here's the soft truth I want to leave you with tonight. You are allowed to change. You're allowed to say no even if you said yes 1,000 times before. You're allowed to draw the line, not out of bitterness, but out of love. For yourself. Maybe you're a grandmother like I am. Maybe a sister, a friend, a mother, or simply someone trying to find their way back home to who they were before the obligations stacked too high. Wherever you are on your path, I hope you remember this. You don't need anyone's permission to start again. You don't have to prove your worth to be loved. And when someone forgets your value, you have every right to remind them gently, firmly, and sometimes silently by stepping away. Maddie's laughter is still in this house now, but so is my peace, and both belong. So if tonight's story touched something quiet in you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Have you ever had to let go in order to grow? And if you enjoy these soft stories about life's deeper turns, be sure to subscribe. More journeys are coming. Until then, breathe easy, rest well. You've earned it.